What's going on, friends? Welcome back to another New World video. Today we're going to be talking about tanking in New World Season 10, otherwise known as the Nighthaven expansion. We're going to be covering weapon mastery, attributes, perks, gear, where to get the gear, artifacts, and so much more. If you're interested in any particular section of tanking with this latest update, you'll be able to check the timestamps down below or scrub along in the video. Now, for my returning players, tanking in New World is mostly the same as it has been in the past, but I feel like it's worth mentioning for those of you brand new to this game, you might have a little bit of confusion over what exactly the role of a tank is. Damage is pretty self-explanatory. You do damage, kill the enemy, and healing, keep people alive. But what exactly is doing tanking? Well, the role of the tank is typically to get the enemy to focus them and not their teammates, so their teammates can focus on doing damage or healing. In order to be an optimal damage player in a PvE setting or an optimal healer, you'll need to be in light armor or a light equip load, whereas the tank, usually it's more optimal to be in heavy armor. You will use taunts. Now, the way that you taunt in this game is you have to have certain weapons that are taunt gem compatible. The sword and shield is a classic, and we're going to get into weapons in a second. But if you put one of these carnelian gems, this is a cut pristine carnelian gem, into the gem socket of your item, so you go to attach charms, and then you find the gem charm, and you want to attach a cut pristine carnelian, that will activate taunts on your weapon. And then what you want to do is you just want to check your weapon skill tree and see which of your abilities are taunt gem compatible. Defender's Resolve is a classic taunt in this game. You can see that bottom text there. It says, if you have a carnelian gem equipped in your sword, activating this ability inflicts taunt for 8 seconds to all enemies within 8 meters. What this looks like in game is simply running up close to an enemy and then pressing the ability. You'll see that they get these little lightning symbols above their head, and then they're forced to attack you for the duration of the taunt. It is that simple. Now, while you are doing this, you want to be doing more than just blocking. Whilst it is important that you stay alive as a tank, you're there to survive. Your role is get the enemy to attack you and then don't die, and your healer is typically going to help you with that. You also still want to be providing some damage. This is going to help you continue to generate threat. Threat is outside of taunts. You can also make sure that enemies will continue to attack you by doing damage, and that damage will be multiplied by the threat generation that you get. In your carnelian, it says you generate 350% more threat. And then the next role after that is also to focus on applying debuffs. So with this Warhammer, we have something like Armor Breaker. Armor Breaker applies a 30% rend to the enemy, making them take significantly more damage. We reduce their armor substantially. And then we also want to use stuns, knockdowns, various CC effects, just to make sure that the enemy are, easier to deal with. That is tanking in a nutshell. First and foremost, getting the enemy to attack you, making sure they're attacking you and not your squishy healer and your squishy DPS. And then after that, it's trying to apply whatever debuffs or buffs to your teammates that you can. With that covered, let's move into weapon choices for tanks. This probably comes as no surprise, but the first tanking option weapon is going to be Sword and Shield. Sword and Shield is the quintessential tanking weapon in this game. If you want to get good with tanking, I strongly recommend you at least learn Sword and Shield. Whilst there are other options, this is going to be the basis of most tank builds. The reason why: it has fantastic passives, it has really strong abilities, it has one of the best taunts in the game, and also the capstone ultimates, defensive formation, and leadership are also really strong as well. This provides a 10% empower, so 10% extra damage to everybody in your group, including yourself. Your group is just your 5-man, by the way. If you're playing in a raid, if you're playing in a group of 10 or 20, it will only be the 4 other people in your party, but it works no matter how far away they are, which is cool. And then you have defensive formation. Everybody who's standing inside the circle will receive 30% less damage, yourself included. And a 30% damage reduction is very significant. We'll cover weapon mastery while we're here as well. I would recommend you always take Defender's Resolve. It's a very good taunt. It's very good damage reduction. I just think it's super good. And then Shield Rush is something I usually like to take very often as well. It provides a 20% weaken to the enemy it hits, but also every enemy within 5 meters of them. Weaken reduces the damage the enemy does to you and to your teammates. It just lowers the enemy's damage. And then I usually like to go for Upheaval. This is one of the newer abilities. Those of you who've been playing New World for a long time will remember it was once upon a time Reverse Stab. But if you, again, have been playing New World for a long time in the past, you might remember with Reverse Stab, you could sort of reset your cooldowns. You can kind of do that here as well with the Tactician upgrade to Upheaval. it lowers all other sword cooldowns by 20%. So I often like to go Defender's Resolve, Shield Rush, and then use Upheaval last to lower the cooldown of my Defender's Resolve and Shield Rush so we can use them sooner. On top of that, some passives that you'll always want to pick up will be Empowered Stab. Successful heavy attacks grant 30% Empower. The cap for Empower in this game is 50%, so with one Empowered Stab and Leadership, you are 40% of the 50% Empower, and if you're using a Honing Stone, which is an 8% or 7% Empower, you're pretty much at the Empower cap just with that alone, so that's pretty strong. One big choice that you'll have to make with your Sword and Shield tank tree is whether you want to be more aggressive and benefit your team's damage, or if you think that you're just going to take too much damage and you don't really trust your team, you want to keep people alive, then you would switch over for the defensive formation. If you're not too keen on Upheaval, you don't care about the cooldown reduction, Whirling Blade is also an excellent option as it provides weaken to the enemies when it hits them, and it can go almost infinite if you pop it at a big pack of enemies. Shield Bash is an ability that I generally wouldn't recommend you go for. Whilst it is a taunt, it only works when you connect with the enemy. I just think that this ends up being a much more consistent taunt, and we haven't covered it yet, but if you do a heavy attack with any weapon that is taunt gem compatible, you will get a guaranteed taunt there as well. This is, again, for returning players, this is a fairly new feature, but you can see here, just above the PvP balancing, it says taunt gem compatible, heavy attacks with a sword with a carnelian gem will taunt the enemy for half a second. So you don't really need that sort of single target or close quarters taunt because you already have it with heavy attacks and you have it with Defender's Resolve. So I generally wouldn't recommend taking this in PvE. And then the other option, Leaping Strike, it's a gap closer. You can use it to get over to the enemy, but typically you don't need that. So for me, it would be Shield Rush, Defender's Resolve, and then it's your choice of Whirling Blade or Upheaval. If you do want to take this right side ultimate, we'll quickly skip to what the skill tree would look like using these same abilities. There are a lot of fantastic passives here that you might consider switching out. One with the shield is fantastic for extended duration of debuffs. If you want to get some extra threat, you can get this, but this is generally what I recommend choosing between one skill tree or the other, but again, if you find something that works for you, go for it. Next up, we're going to talk about the Flail and Shield, but I think while we're on this menu, I'm also going to cover which weapons we will be including in this guide. That is going to be Sword and Shield, as we've already covered, Flail and Shield, Warhammer, and Greatsword. Technically, all melee weapons are Taunt Gem compatible. You can see here, if you hover over them, we have that just above the PvP balancing. Taunt Gem, Taunt Gem, Taunt Gem, Taunt Gem, Taunt Gem. Even the Rapier is Taunt Gem, and technically, Void Blade or Void Gauntlet, you can use a Taunt Gem here if you want to. That can now taunt enemies. Magical weapons have taunt. You can use Incinerate, but I don't believe that Fire Staff Void Gauntlet tanking is really that consistent. The same with the Blunderbuss as well. Again, play around and have fun and do what works for you. Rapier tanking is actually kind of good, but it's a little bit off meta. The same with Hatchet. It can be fantastic, but also not that good. And Spear and Great Axe, they are also can work as tank weapons, but we're going to go for the classic, the tried, the tested, the true, the tank builds that I think you'll be using in raids, the tank builds you'll be using in high-end content. But I just thought I'd mention, I'm not necessarily saying that these weapons are bad for tanking, but it would take a while to cover everything, and I just want to cover what I consider to be S-tier tanking weapons. So with that being said, let's move into the Flail and Shield. My Flail and Shield skill tree is very similar, whether I'm playing healer or whether I'm playing tank. I often like to run the same abilities. This is your taunt with the Flail and Shield. It is like with the Sword and Shield, it's an 8-second, 8-meter AoE, and it doesn't have to connect with them, so it's just fantastic. If you take Best Friends, you can give yourself and another person damage reduction, which is fantastic. Arcane Vortex is great for generating threat because it does a little bit of healing. It also gives you movement speed. It roots the enemy. It's very, very nice. And then Powerful Eruption, or Arcane Eruption rather. Powerful Eruption is the upgrade that you put on your weapon. This will extend the duration of Rend, Weaken, Exhaust, Disease, so it makes all the debuffs and the enemies last longer, and it also gives a little bit of a heal. This heal is going to be very minimal when you're in heavy armor. Your healing isn't that good, but I still think it's quite nice. Passives, I think you should always pick up Reinforced Vitality and Vital Suppressant as a tank. These give you really good damage reduction. Also, Weighted Superiority. When you take a hit, you get cooldown reduction. This can help you so you can spam your abilities more often. And then also Vital Embrace, Spiky Impairment, and Leader of the Pack are also must-have for all of the benefits they provide. Damage Reflection gives your teams an Empower, or gives you base damage if nobody else is nearby, and then also gives you a little bit of lifesteal, or extends the duration of damage over time. When it comes to the ultimate, Human Shield isn't really that good. You're going to take more damage from your like squishy healer or your DPS who's getting hit for like 6,000 because they don't have any armor. So I'm not a big fan of Human Shield personally. I like to go for Better Together. It's a very small amount of healing, but it does count, and it also most importantly generates threat as well. Because you're healing other people, healing is a good way to generate additional threat and aggro, so I do like this as a little bit of tanking tech as well. Now we're going to talk about the Greatsword. This is one of my favorite tanking weapons. We've made several Greatsword tank builds in the past and put them up on YouTube if you want to see what those look like. We'll put a link up in the top right, although those videos are from the past in New World, but the concept is still the same. We go with the ultimate on the left side because this gives us super good cooldown reduction. Every time we land a heavy attack, we get 10% cooldown reduction, so we can spam our abilities more often. Calamity counter, again, like with the sword and shield and like with the flail, it's an 8-second, 8-meter AoE taunt, so that's the top tier of taunts right there. It gives you massive stamina reduction, so when you pop this ability, it's very, very hard for the enemy to do any damage to your stamina, which is great. It can basically just give you a breather. You can put bleeds on the enemy, which will, again, continue to generate threat. It will build up your Heartrune a lot faster, and if you take the final upgrade, you can get a pretty good heal as well. I would always recommend that you pick up Relentless Rush on the left side. This is great for just repositioning. It gives you a little bit of heal and a little bit of empower, but using Relentless Rush to spin through enemies and then using Calamity Counter on the other side to quickly taunt them. It's just really cool tank tech. I like that a lot. And then finally, the last ability can be up to you, but I would recommend taking one more ability in the blue side skill tree. And the reason why is you want to spend most of your time when you're tanking with the Greatsword in the Path of Defiance. The Path of Defiance, in fact, it'll just be easier to show you here. When you go into the Path of Defiance, you will have this little blue aura in front of you. And when you have the blue aura, you're both blocking and attacking at the same time. So that blue aura there is basically you blocking, but you're also doing heavy attacks. And as we've covered earlier, the significance of the heavy attack, it is a guaranteed taunt. Every time you land a heavy attack on an enemy, you will be taunting them for half a second. So you get it like a 2-for-1 there. You're blocking, you're attacking, and you're taunting. Very, very, very strong. Some of you guys are maybe asking why we don't take this one over here, because we're going to be blocking very often so we can heal for the damage dealt. I personally find that getting the cooldown reduction so you can spam your abilities more often will help you stay alive a lot longer. The more frequently you can use counter, the better. I also really like to go for Rupture because this removes some debuffs. This can be handy in a pinch, and it does make you uninterruptible for 5 seconds. Uninterruptible is a very strong buff. It basically means you can't be knocked and staggered around. So applying this when you're in a tough pinch because you've got like 70 enemies, if you've gone really deep through a dungeon, you've done a big pull, popping this to get the intimidating roar and put the weaken on the enemies can be a great way to start the fight. And most importantly, it also gets you into that Defiance mode, which, as we've already covered, that's something you want to spend most of the time in. One thing to be aware of when it comes to the Greatsword, we compare this to the Sword and Shield or to the Flail and Shield. It doesn't really provide any buffs to our teammates, and it provides minimal debuffs to the enemy. In fact, the only real debuff you can get is if you take Skyward Slash. This applies 1 rend. So whilst the Greatsword is a fantastic tanking weapon, it meets the first criteria of tanking where we want to get the enemy to attack us and we want to stay alive. It doesn't really do much for the second criteria, and that's like buffing our teammates, debuffing the enemy, just doing some more support stuff. So the Greatsword is a fantastic tanking weapon, but it is quite a selfish tanking weapon. And then lastly, we should talk about the Warhammer. This is the second criteria that we talked about, where you want to be putting debuffs and you want to be stunning and you want to be playing support. Whilst it does have some fantastic sort of taunting capabilities, with Shockwave being the iconic taunt, everybody that is hit by the Shockwave, so you do actually have to connect with it, will be taunted and forced to attack you for 6 seconds. It also has some fantastic debuffs you can put on the enemy in the form of Rend. So Armor Breaker is a 30% Rend, very, very strong application of this ability. And then you can also get a perk for your Warhammer called Sundering Shockwave, which is an additional 15% Rend. And then if you really want to go all out, you can get Trenchant Rend, which makes your heavy attacks, again, apply even more Rend. So we've got an 18% Rend there, a 15% Rend there for a total of 33%. And then with the Armor Breaker, we have another 30%, so we're at 66% Rend, which is significant. I believe the Rend cap is 70%, so we are almost at the Rend cap just with our Warhammer alone. It is a fantastic tanking weapon. It pairs well with the Sword and Shield or the Flail and Shield or even the Greatsword. Good for knocking down the enemies, good for applying Rend. Definitely one that you will want to put in your repertoire, one that you will want to learn how to play with well if you are interested in playing the role of tank in New World Aeternum. When it comes to attributes for tanking, one thing that I recommend you do first before you assign your stats, or when you're ready to go and start doing some tanking and fight something, is get yourself some roasted rabbit with seasoned vegetables. This is an attribute food that gives you 48 additional constitution. It lasts for 40 minutes. So it just means you'll default be at 50 constitution whenever you have this. Now, we do want to go above 50 constitution. For me, with any tank build, I'm typically looking to play at least 250 constitution. If you're brand new to tanking, you may want to consider 300 or even 350, but do be aware that, again, we want to stay alive. We do still need to do some damage. If you don't do any damage, you will not really generate enough threat. You could just keep taunting over and over again, but generally doing some damage is advised as a tank. So 250 is the sort of threshold. That's what I've been playing with these days. But again, if you want to add more, I would recommend it. One thing to be aware of, those of you who are coming back to New World after an extended break, you might remember that for a long time, tanks played with 300 constitution. And the reason, not only because it gave them health, but it also gave you grit, which meant you couldn't be interrupted. When you were doing light and heavy attacks, the enemy just couldn't stop you. You don't have that anymore. There is a way to get it, but it is very difficult unless you play certain weapons. So the 300 contact specifically for the grit is no longer a thing. Now you're just taking constitution to effectively have a bigger health pool. But we'll lock in that 250, and then we'll focus on what we would do for our first build, which is Sword and Shield Warhammer. So with Sword and Shield Warhammer, the primary scaling stat is strength on both of these. We have an S tier scaling with strength and an S tier scaling with strength. They both do have dexterity scaling with an E tier, which if I'm not mistaken, I think is like 55% or 45%. It's pretty poor, but it is about, I think it's a 75% scaling with the Sword and Shield. So dexterity does do something for both of them. So I usually like to go to 25 dexterity. We just get that critical hit chance, more crits, just more damage. And then I dump the rest of the points into strength from here just to see what we can get to. And actually at this point, I'm remembering we're just shy of, I wanted to do this. We are just shy of getting 3% extra base damage while we're under 90% health. You will be under 90% health pretty often. 3% base damage I think is better than the 40% base damage reduction when you're at full health, because that's only going to be on one hit and then it goes away. So I think there is a strong argument to instead go with 300 strength and just be under 250. It is going to come down to your personal preference. I would recommend keeping that critical hit chance. So whether you want to do a little bit more damage or you just want to be slightly tankier when you're at full health. But again, this goes away after one hit and you have to wait 30 seconds, whereas this is active all the time provided you're under 90% health. It's going to be personal preference, but for me, I would respec again and I would drop down to 248, and we put those two other points in there. Next up, let's talk about if we were going to play Flail and Shield Warhammer or Flail and Shield Sword and Shield. Flail and Shield Sword and Shield is a fun build. I've been playing quite a bit of that lately in my tank build as well. I don't think we actually have a sword now, so you'll just have to imagine this is a sword over here. But if we were going to play Flail and Shield and Sword and Shield, or we were going to play Flail and Shield and Warhammer, or technically even Flail and Shield with sword, with Great Sword, what we would do is we'd still go to that 250. 250 is going to be a baseline for everything we do here. But then we would put some points into focus. If I'm going to play Flail, I usually like to go for 50 focus. Not only does this give the Flail some damage, because it does have a C tier scaling off of focus, so it still gives it some damage, but this gives you cooldown reduction and it gives you incoming healing, which you can benefit from quite significantly as a tank. And then again, we dump the remaining points into strength, and we'll probably not make the same mistake we made last time, so we'll try and hit the right threshold. So let's see, what do we get to here? Actually, because we got 50 points in focus, we can't hit that. Yeah, so we would just do something like this instead. For Flail and Shield with any combination of weapon, this is what I would want to play with. And then finally, let's talk about the Greatsword. Greatsword scales equally with both strength and dexterity. So if we go over here, it's got a B tier scaling with strength, B tier scaling with dexterity. If I'm not mistaken, S tier is 95%, A tier is 85%, so B tier must be 75%. Some citation needed there, but basically what this means is if we want to get the most bang for buck out of our greatsword, we kind of need to put points into both of these equally. So we want to have strength and dex equal. With this latest update, they have done away with diminishing returns, but I think picking up the threshold bonuses is going to be the best thing to do. Duration to damage over time effects is very nice. That's going to make the bleeds last longer, and the greatsword does apply quite a few bleeds with the unflinching blade passive. That's this one over here, friends. And then you can also get a bleed over here. So you will be applying bleeds fairly frequently. And as a result, I do think that getting that 150 dex is definitely worth it. And then you can continue to pump up dex, although all the other weapons that we're pairing Greatsword with, which is, again, Sword and Shield, or the Warhammer, or the Flail, they all care about strength as their primary, so I wouldn't really continue with dex. I'd just get it to 150, and then the rest of the points can actually go into strength from here. So yeah, we got there in the end. I feel like I did a very confusing explanation of that, but hopefully that makes sense as to what we would do with our Greatsword attributes. If you were playing Greatsword with a Flail and Shield, I think you would probably have to forego that 50 focus because getting these stats would be more important. But if you really wanted to do it, then I guess you drop down some strength, because I do think getting that dexterity for the damage over time is really good for the Greatsword. So you probably do it this way instead. But I think, again, if you were playing Flail and Shield with a Greatsword, maybe forego the focus in that particular example. For gear and tank builds, it probably comes as no surprise, but we are going to be looking quite defensive. We're going to be looking to reduce incoming damage, and therefore we'll want to take perks and gems and everything else that will help us achieve that goal, so we're not going to get blown up by the first attack our enemy lands on us. To that extent, right now I'm using Enchanted Ward on my armor, but according to the game developers, the ability to put this perk, which is an old perk, because you can see it doesn't have the number 2 on it, this is not supposed to be happening, where you can have Enchanted Ward, the old one, and Enchanted Ward, the new one. So to that extent, showing you guys through my gear isn't going to make a whole lot of sense, because although I do think this is a very powerful combo right now, it is something that is going to be replaced. My understanding is they'll replace this Enchanted Ward with a defensive charm slot. So at that point, we would just have strike conditioning, a defensive charm slot, a skill charm slot, and an offensive charm slot. So I think what I'll do here, friends, is I'm just going to defer you to our Discord. This is discord.gg/The Shire. We're going to have a link to it in the description down below. And here's an example of gear that I would actually want to wear when this update comes into effect. So you can see we are prioritizing getting these thrust and slash conditioning. Slash is one of the most common damage types in the game, and that's why we see it across so many pieces of gear. One of the perks that might be worth considering as a tank is Prolonged Favor. This will extend the duration of buffs on your character. We'll get into why that could be particularly good later on with some tech. But I'd say for a fairly bog standard and safe tanking build, looking for slash or strike or thrust conditioning, physical damage again is very, very, very common in this game. This is going to be good. You will want to prioritize having defensive charm slots in your gear for the most part. Defensive charm slots will allow you to slot Enchanted Ward. Enchanted Ward 2, you want to make sure you have 5 stacks of this. This is going to reduce the damage you take from light and heavy attacks. And as we covered in the healer video, you can see that a significant portion of damage that comes from the enemies is in the form of light or heavy attacks. These are the bosses in the current raid, the Isle of Night. We have Overlord Thorpe here. He's got heavy attack, heavy attack, heavy attack, heavy attack, heavy attack, light, 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 heavy, heavy, light, 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 heavy, heavy, heavy. You see, like, there's really not that many magical attacks. The majority of AI damage is light and heavy attacks, and therefore Enchanted Ward 2 does put in some pretty good value. Other defensive charm slots that I've gone for would include Wellness, just to increase our max health. If you would prefer to, Divine is also excellent here as well to increase your incoming healing from your lifesteal and from your healer. Keenly Fortified is a must-have as a one-of on something. Just when you crit, you get Fortified. That is huge. And then also, I think a little bit of leeching can help as well. This will allow you to sustain, and it goes pretty well with Blood Drinker. We're going to get into artifacts in a little bit, but this is generally what we're looking for. Slash conditioning or thrust conditioning is a fixed perk, and then we want to be looking for those defensive slots for the most part. We want a gem slot in all of our gear because gems give us a good amount of damage reduction. We can either go for physical or elemental damage reduction with our gems. One thing that is missing in here that I am going to be updating this build just to make it a little bit more confusing is missing a perk charm slot. I do believe we'd want to have one perk charm slot somewhere in here that has Fortifying Shield Rush too. So I'd probably replace this Keen up at the top here with a perk charm so we can put Fortifying Shield Rush if we're going to be playing with Sword and Shield. One of the really important things to look for on your tank is with the amulet and the earring. With the amulet, you can get these protection perks down here. These will reduce the damage that you take from certain damage types. I've decided to go for all of the physical damage types here. Getting an amulet like this to drop is quite difficult, so just focus on trying to get 2 perk right now. So what I have is an amulet with this here, Slash, Thrust, and Frozen. It does most of the job, and then you can get other protection perks on your shield to kind of stack them together. But aim to get Slash and Thrust to start with, because those are very, very common damage types. and then prioritize getting the gem slot. And that's that fortifying shield rush that we talked about earlier. One other thing that you want to be looking for is despised and regeneration on your earring. And then ideally, we also want to have refreshment down here. I have refreshing move, which I think is pretty good with a greatsword, but refreshment I think is just a better form of cooldown reduction. Cooldown reduction is good for the tank because you want to be able to use your abilities more often. Despised and regeneration. Despised obviously generating more threat and you doing more damage to taunted foes when you're in control of the taunts is pretty good. Regeneration just passively brings you health back, which will again continue to like generate aggro on the enemies. So there's like a 2-for-1 there with this is like a super tanking tool. And then finally, like I say, I'm in favor of refreshment over refreshing move because in refreshment, when you get it to 800 gear score, would represent 10% cooldown reduction, whereas refreshing move is only 1% cooldown reduction on every light attack. So you'd have to land 10 light attacks in order to get the same value as refreshment. And I think by the time you've done 10 light attacks, I don't know, a decent portion of time would have passed. So I'm just more in the camp of refreshment than refreshing move for my tank build. So yeah, despised, regeneration, and refreshment. Ideally with a gem slot as well. Unfortunately, we don't have that there. When it comes to perks on your weapons, with the Warhammer and Greatsword, they both care a lot about doing heavy attacks. They both have a lot of things in their skill trees for doing heavy attacks. We have heavy attacks giving cooldown reduction. We have heavy attacks giving us grit. And then the same with the Greatsword. Greatsword has the unflinching blade, which gives your heavy attacks the grit and applies a bleed. And obviously we already talked about heavy attacks giving you the ability to block and taunt. So to that extent, taking perks like Trenchant Rend or Trenchant Recovery or Trenchant Strikes, things that care about heavy attacks, those are great fixed perks to look for on both your Warhammer and your Greatsword. Ideally, this Warhammer here would have Trenchant Rend and Trenchant Strikes, Trenchant Rend, Trenchant Strikes 2, and we just dropped that keen up there. Sundering Shockwave feels like it's a must-have charm. Definitely socket it into the Warhammer. It's weaker when you put it in your armor and you want to apply as much rend as possible. One thing that I played around with in the past is also having Sundering Destiny, so that's Sundering Path of Destiny, but I decided to do away with that because it's just really awkward to try and cast or use Path of Destiny in the enemy. Unlike many other abilities within the Warhammer skill tree, it doesn't have grit, and that just means it gets interrupted all the time, and I just found that super frustrating. So I decided to do away with the Sundering Destiny in case you were wondering about that one. Here's a quick look at a Greatsword that I've been using in other builds. Again, we've got the heavy attack perks that we care about here, or at least the Trenchant Strikes. This would be, again, ideally Trenchant Recovery. There isn't any particular charm that you need. Relentless Freedom is the best charm, but you're better off putting this on your armor. The main thing you care about is that it removes roots and slows, so that's just as good in your armor as it is in your weapons. So for the Greatsword, you just want to go Trenchant Strikes and or Trenchant Recovery and or Trenchant Rend, and then just get some offensive charm slots along with the Carnelian gem slot in general. For your non-artifact sword, prioritize getting perks like End 2 and Sundering Stacks 2 as your fixed. These are pretty good for just spamming light attacks and applying rend and also doing some more damage. And then I would prioritize, of course, getting the gem slot so you can get the Carnelian gem, and then Keen or Keenly Jagged. Offensive charms, defensive charms, it can be whatever you want up here. I don't think there's anything that is a must-have in terms of the other charm slots. I just think actually the fixed perks and the gem. So these bottom three, these are the ones that you really want to be looking for. The top one, it can be any combination of perk charms or offensive charms or defensive charms. If you do find yourself up with a perk charm, then you can just stick Contagious Upheaval in there, do a bit of extra damage with it, flips and debuffs over to the enemy. It's not a bad one. And then finally, when it comes to Flail, if you're going to play Flail in a tank build, I would say that you should almost always go for the Artifact Flail. And as a result, I'm not going to recommend any other perks or what you should be looking for on the Flail. It would be similar to the Sword, where we'd look for Sundering Stacks 2 and End 2. Thankfully, it's already got it on it. And the good news is Power Stone is incredibly easy to get. It just comes from activities, soul trials. These are solo boss encounters, and you can get Power Stone really quickly from there. But yeah, if you really needed to know, then your perks would look very similar on the Flail to what they do with the Sword. But I would say if you're going to use Flail on a tank build, use Power Stone. When it comes to tank artifacts, there are quite a lot of options. Right now, I'm using Wit as my artifact sword. This comes from doing mutated expeditions. When you finish a mutated expedition, you'll get a box like this, and when you open it up, you have a chance to get Wit. It can be bronze, silver, or gold. It can be difficulty 1, difficulty 2, difficulty 3, but that's where you can get Wit from. A lot of people ask, why am I putting a Carnelian gem in Wit when it already has taunts are active? Why do we want to have taunts active? It's because we also generate 350% extra threat. This does generate 200% more threat, but only on light attack critical hits. So you have to land a light attack and it has to be a crit, and then you get the 200% extra threat, whereas this is just on everything. So I do like that. It reduces the damage the enemy does to me, which is pretty nice, 15% for 3 seconds, and this works on both weapons. So we do have taunts on both of our weapons, and the light attacks on a Warhammer, not that we really light attack with the Warhammer that often, but the light attacks on the Warhammer would also reduce the threat as well. So this could work pretty well with Flail if you were playing Sword and Shield and you weren't using Artifact Flail for some reason. Keenly Fortified, I think, comes in Wit by default. It is a really good perk. I've unfortunately got it on 2 different pieces right now. And then Enchanter Board is just really good for the damage reduction. So those would be the charm slots I would put in there. Blood Drinker, you can get this from doing mutated expeditions, or specifically rather, mutated Starstone Barrows. This is about to rotate out of the cycle, unfortunately, but you get it from the final boss. This gives you a huge amount of lifesteal, 25% lifesteal, so 25% of the damage you do, you get it back as health, which is insanely good. However, it does come with a pretty big penalty, minus 20% base damage. You can reduce this down to 15% if the enemy is diseased. And one thing that I'm considering doing or exploring, I'll see if it works out. We're going to attach a charm to here. With the gem, we're going to put in a Cut Pristine Jade gem, and that will apply disease to the enemy, which will effectively allow us to do 5% more damage because we'll drop the 20% down to 15%. But haven't tried that yet. I'll have to let you guys know how it works. Finally, my favorite artifact armor of choice right now is the Unmoved. This says you cannot be displaced, so you can't be shoved like left or right, or you can't be like knocked back across the room. There are quite a lot of boss mechanics which would knock you further back. It doesn't stop you from being knocked down or staggered, but it does just mean it's easier to hold your ground. It recently got a buff. It says whenever you take a hit, you reflect void damage back to your target, equal to 16% of your weapon damage. So this is just an additional way to generate some extra threat, put a bit of damage in, and it also gets you some Heartrune shards so you can use your Heartrune more often. Some other classic tanking options would include the Void Dark Plate. This increases your armor by 20%, so you just get 20% extra armor. That's pretty good when you're in a heavy equip load. You can see right now I'm at 2,847, so if I just go ahead and put on some boots, I think unfortunately we've only got light boots, so this isn't going to be a great example, but we put light boots on and then we put that one. We're now at like 2,900, and this would probably be over 3,000 if we could actually get it to properly work. So yeah, there we go. Now I've got my shield out and stuff. So it's a pretty significant increase in armor. It is good. If you want to get this, it comes from Barnacles and Black Powder Mutated, which is not currently in the cycle, but by the time this video comes out, it might be. I think this is a fine option over the Unmoved if you want to play with this, or if you only have this. The Unmoved, by the way, we forgot to mention, comes from the PvP rewards track. But yeah, the extra armor increase is fantastic, but it does come with a little bit of a penalty now. So you take 8% increased block damage. So yeah, people break a block just a little bit faster. It's got 3 defense slots, so I'd go Enchanter Board 2, Divine 2, and then this other one over here. I guess you could rock that as your Keenly Fortified if you don't have it in your sword. Otherwise, consider taking Anointed Lifesteal, I guess, just to synergize with your Blood Drinker. Other potential artifacts that you could run with various tank builds, including with Wit, would be Magnetic Gauntlets. This increases your crit chance by 50%, so you crit more often, which means you can keep this up all the time. I think it's a little bit too cutesy to properly consider. But you could, again, that is an option if you want to take a look at it. We've already covered it, but if you're going to be playing Flail, Power Stone is fantastic. The 20% weaken every time you land an attack on an enemy with both weapons. As long as you're above 90% health, 20% weaken, very, very strong. A must-have if you're going to be playing Flail. Sadly, Serenity no longer really works as a Greatsword tank as it doesn't have a gem slot. The same with Crescent's Wave. There's also no gem slot in this as well, so you're really limited when it comes to Greatsword tanking. There is another Greatsword called Grace, but I also just don't really think that's worth it. So if you want a Greatsword tank, you'll just have to get yourself a crafted or dropped Greatsword, like the one that we showed earlier on in the video. For Artifact Warhammers, it's also pretty limited in choice as well. You can go Trisna, which is not bad. That's a lot of lifesteal there, 25% lifesteal against knockdown or stun foes. It is hard to get this to work on bosses though, because you can't knock down or stun them. Spark of Mjolnir also doesn't have a gem slot, so is off the menu. And then there's another Warhammer called the Yeatison's Hammer, but again, that one's just a bit too silly, and it also doesn't have a gem slot. Same with Odo, no gem slot. Same with Butcher, no gem slot. You guys might be thinking, but Baggins, we can get past the gem slot. We can use Lost Stopwatch and this makes sure taunts are active. I just don't think this amulet's very good these days. I would not want to run it. These perks down here are pretty bad. It reduces your damage. I just think Blood Drinker is far too good to give up to run this. So yeah, there's a lot of weapons that are off the tanking menu now because they do not have a gem slot and you can't put a gem slot in them. Finally, we'll talk about the shields. You can use the wall. This is pretty good. Gives you 5% base damage reduction and you take less damage from elemental damage as well. So 13% less elemental damage. This is a solid option. It does have a big penalty and that you cannot dodge, but if you're very good with blocking, this is a fantastic shield to use. You get this from rocking or doing mutated Ennead, so you have to wait for Ennead or Aeneid to be in the cycle, and then it drops from the final boss. And then finally, we do have Relentless. I also consider this not worth it because it reduces your armor by 25%, which is a pretty hefty penalty. Yeah, I guess if you want to be super friendly, give everybody extra incoming healing. This does work on your own lifesteal, so you can heal 20% more from lifesteal, but that 25% armor penalty is just too much. So the standout artifacts for me, Power Stone and Wit, Unmoved, Void Dark Plate, Blood Drinker, the Wall, and it might be slightly worth to consider using Ankh as well, so you can get more healing from your life staff player, but your lifesteal will be reduced and you won't be able to heal as much from potions, so I think this one is very questionable as well. So we've covered what good tanking gear looks like, the weapons and everything. Now the most exciting part, where do we actually get the gear from? Well, one of the most straightforward ways is just head to the trading post. So you've just hit level 70, just buy the cheapest heavy armor, shield, sword, warhammer, just buy your loadout in the cheapest form you can. So it's full heavy, it doesn't matter what's on it. It's a tower shield, it doesn't matter what's on it. And then it's a sword and shield, it's a flail and shield, it's a warhammer, it's a great sword, whatever it is, it just make it cheap and put it all on. And then once you've got a really basic set of gear on, you can go out and join the masses in doing chest runs. Again, I have some hesitancy because I don't think chest runs are like the most fun content in the game, but a lot of people do enjoy them. If you're not familiar with the concept of a chest run, you basically take a big group of people and then you run around in one area and you open up lots of chests and you get a ton of items. If you want to join them, you can just take a look in recruitment chat. Over on Europe, we put plus. On North American servers, it's X. So you basically just type the same thing people are typing. So right now there's a lot of people typing plus trib. So if I was to do the same, plus trib, and we type it a few times, we'd hopefully get an invite to a group. And trib is Tribunal High Mound, so it's all the way down here. But if you're unsure of where it is, you can just accept that invite. You'll see where people are grouping up, hopefully, or eventually where they're going to mass. That would be down here. And you just go around with a big group of people and you open chests. And the reason why I say that you should wear heavy armor or you should wear your tank loadout, the most basic and cheapest version of what you can, is because there is a system called loot biasing. So you'll get more of the current stuff that you're wearing. So if you're wearing heavy armor, you'll get more heavy armor. If you're wearing a sword, you'll get more swords. If you're wearing a warhammer, you'll get a warhammer. And that's the approach you can take right there. It's very straightforward. It's very low effort, but yeah, just get a bunch of people, go around, open chests. That is a system that definitely works. Next up, if we want to take a more fun approach to this, we can jump into some activities. I think catacombs are a great way to sort of practice and learn tanking. Some of the best catacombs compositions I've went with is a tank and 2 damage players. So if you want to just practice tanking and holding the attention of the enemy and do some catacombs at the same time, I think this is good. Just queue up as a tank, find 2 random players. They'll most likely be damage players themselves. You will have a problem here that because I don't think that many you're not going to encounter that many healers. You're going to need to keep yourself alive, so using potions or ideally getting Blood Drinker. But that'll be good practice for tanking. You know, if your healer's down or whatever, can you keep yourself topped up? The benefit of doing catacombs is you will earn the 2 different currencies in there. So the first one is the silver tokens. So it's this one here, the mythic sterling, and then you'll earn the mythic crowns. You only earn mythic crowns if you kill 2 or more bosses. You take those crowns and you go to the catacomb shop, which is at the sort of bottom of Nighthaven, the Tullarest Obby, and you can buy boxes of gear. So here's some that I bought earlier. I got myself some trinket caches so we can open it up and maybe we'll get a nice earring or something. There we go. We got a amulet with strike protection and lightning protection. If that was strike protection and slash protection or strike protection and thrust protection, we'd be pretty happy. It doesn't have a gem slot, but I think you can make that exception when it comes to amulets. We got ourselves a ring there with nothing good. We got ourselves an earring with beloved, which could have been despised. But you guys get the idea. Do this enough times and eventually you'll get some good gear out of there. I also got myself some shields. I feel like shields are pretty difficult to get to drop, so Grab some shields here. Again, we'd be looking for those protection perks. That one's not bad there, especially for void mutations. That would be a pretty good shield. Another one with frozen protection. Shock conditioning, slash protection. So we got ourselves a slash protection shield there. Like a lot of these that are coming out are pretty good. Gem slot is, you can also get another gem slot on your shield, which is a new change. But one thing that I would definitely recommend you do as you run more and more catacombs, you'll get enough tokens to buy yourself the elementally charged set armor chest. So again, you can find this in the catacomb shop. You'll need to have 10 of the golden tokens. So if you kill like 3 or 4 bosses, you'll make enough in one run, but it might take you several runs. But with your mythic crowns, I strongly recommend buying the elementally charged set armor chest. This will get you this item here. So this is the main reason we want this is that top perk there. It says, while you have no elemental charges, you take 5% less elemental damage. 5% less elemental damage is really, really good. That's like wearing 2 additional opal gems. Just you've got let's say 2.5 rather. Yeah, 2.5 because it's 2% each. So an additional 2.5 opal gems and 1 piece of gear is fantastic. Obviously, this does mean that you won't be able to wear Void Darkplate if you're going to wear this, but I think the sacrifice you can have unmoved or have the wall is worth it. So very strong piece of tech there for a tank. There is a lot of elemental damage, especially if you're interested in mutated dungeons. A lot of bosses do some sort of fire damage or frost damage or void damage, so this is fantastic to pick up there. And then ideally you're hoping that the random perk down here is going to be slash conditioning or thrust conditioning. In this case I've got sturdy energy. In that case, we got strike conditioning, so I think I actually would consider making that switch there. It's probably a little bit better than sturdy energy, but that is definitely some tech to know about right there. Lastly, let's talk about infix perks. These are somewhat like artifacts, except unlike artifacts, you can wear as many as you want. One infix perk you'll definitely want to be chasing as a tank is the infix ring called Unstoppable. This says you gain grit during heavy attacks and during melee, so it's really, really good. Whenever you're swinging or you're doing heavies, you will have your character glowing white, as you can see there, and they will be uninterruptible. Very, very, very strong indeed. If you want to get this ring, I personally got it from doing activities, and then I did the Hive of Gorgons raid first boss, but I believe it can just drop from chests as well. So if you go do those chest runs, in particular, Cutlass Keys has been super successful for me when it comes to getting infix. Merc Guard up here, we've gotten quite a few. And then the other one I've been doing as well is the Imperial Palace. This area has also gotten me quite a lot of infix perks. Again, there is a huge degree of randomness in getting this, and then you not only do you get the perk, but you got to randomize these other things down here as well, and I got some pretty garbage stuff, but trying to get this and equipping this, I think this is one where you would replace Blood Drinker and go for a different artifact jewelry. But in the meantime, again, Blood Drinker is fantastic, but I felt like it would be a crime to not mention that this exists in this video. And we also have set bonus gear as well. So the Tenacity set is something that I'm looking to work my way towards. Successful light attacks apply grit, and you also gain grit when you're staggered, which is pretty nice. This is available on a set that is not in the game right now, so kind of frustrating. It's going to be added to the PvP rewards track fairly soon, though, I think. Whilst it does have Thorny Reflection on some pieces, I do think it is going to be worth trying to get that 4-piece set bonus there. Just maybe skipping the chest and wearing our elemental chest instead. Some really good stuff here. You get grit while gain critical chance while grit is active is pretty nice. These gloves are okay. These legs are okay. And these boots, incoming heals while grit is active, those are huge as well. So definitely getting some of this set piece armor is going to be a really big deal. Grinding the PvP rewards track for that when it's in the game is something you'll want to do as a tank for sure. And to wrap up this video, guys, I just want to quickly go over a few things that I feel like we glossed over or didn't explain too well. When it comes to your Heartrune, I think Stone Form is a fantastic default Heartrune to go. A lot of people ask me about this Heartrune and where to get it from. You want to go to activities, you want to go to expeditions, and then queue up for Lazarus Instrumentality. It can drop from the final boss. I think it's like an 80% drop chance, so you should get it within like 1 or 2 runs. In order to upgrade it and get it to this Stalwart version, you'll need to have the blue version in your inventory and have it unlocked, so make sure you don't see the lock symbol next to it, and take it to a stone cutting table. You can upgrade it to the major version there, and then you again have the major version in your inventory and upgrade it to the orange version, and I think Stalwart is the best one to go for. When it comes to gems in our armor, obviously carnelians are always going for in our weapons, but when it comes to gems in our armor and jewelry, I tend to favor going for elemental damage absorption, and the reason why I do that is because the other perks that I would want to prioritize would be the physical damage types. We can cover the physical damage types pretty easily with these perks down here: strike conditioning, slash conditioning, on the amulet having like slash protection, thrust protection. There's only 3 physical types of damage in the game, so it's pretty easy to just focus on them, whereas there's 6 different types of elemental damage with fire, frost, lightning, void, nature, arcane. So instead of like trying to focus on each individual element with getting like frozen protection and lightning protection and stuff, instead I just do opal gems. Elemental gems will cover all the elements, and it's quite nice. One thing to be aware of as a tank, and honestly in PvE pretty often, is you will need to change out your gems on occasion. So changing them over to onyx gems if you're going against a particularly physical heavy fight. For example, in the past when we do the Hive of Gorgons raid, there's a lot of physical damage in that fight, apart from on the final boss where she does a lot of nature damage, so running onyx gems in your armor for certain boss fights makes sense. This is something that will come with time in New World, but the more you play of the game, the more you will get a feel for what gems you want to change out. I also wanted to briefly discuss some tech that I'm considering running in the build here. So I have an old shield right now. This is a shield without any of the Mark II perks in it. Now, one of the reasons I made this change is because it's been made apparent to me, or I've been told about this, that if you have a shield that has, let's say for example, slash protection. So I have slash protection 2 on my shield, and I have slash protection 2 on my amulet. They do not both count. You only get 1 instance of it. It's a max stack of 1, so it's not, there's no point having the same protection perk on your amulet as your shield. So instead, what I'm considering is going for slash shield ward. This is technically a different perk, and therefore I can get another version of it. Now, this is an old item, but to my understanding, the only issue, or the only thing that the developers are changing, is where they change the old perks on new items. So old items will still continue to exist. You can still get these in the game. This one comes from the Sandworm, so it's a bit tricky to achieve, but you can craft a version of this. You can get it from the trading post for relatively cheap. But one other thing that I'm interested in this, it has shield defense, which is just a straight up damage reduction. You don't get that on too many of these new shields, which I think is fantastic. And it also has Fortifying Shield Rush. It's got the old version of Fortifying Shield Rush, and then we have the new version here. Again, these are on 2 separate items, so I don't believe that we're gonna see this removed from the game. It could change, but just want to make you guys aware of this tech. So this gives us a 15% Fortify, and this gives me a 31% Fortify, but we get both of them together. So if I go and find an enemy, we attack somebody, we'll see 2 different applications of Fortify, which is really, really strong. So let's go get this gargoyle thing over here. And there we go. There's our Fortifying Shield Rush and our Fortifying Shield Rush. So pretty crazy tech. Whether it's going to be worth doing, whether Amazon is going to do something about this, I don't know. Again, if you have an old perk and a new perk on the same item, I think that's going to be dealt with. But if you just have old perks on an old item, I don't think they're going to do anything there. So it might be worth running old shields and getting the old version of Fortifying Shield Rush so you can stack it with the new version, along with the old version of some sort of protection perk, which was formerly called Slash Shield Ward or Strike Shield Ward. I do think there is some merit in exploring that avenue as well. Anyway, this video has gone unbelievably long. I hopefully didn't waffle too much and ramble here. If there's anything I did miss, I really hope I didn't, but if there's anything I did miss, let me know in the comments down below, or hop in on the live stream. We're live on Twitch pretty much every day playing this Nighthaven expansion, and we're live on YouTube as well. So if you just subscribe to the channel, you'll see when I go live. We're live for a good 8 to 12 hours every day, answering questions in chat, showing off new builds. We're going to have some damage builds coming up on the YouTube channel in the near future. And of course, if you want to check out the build that we showed in the video today with the tank build, including if we make any changes based on the tech and research that we do, you can find those in the New World build bot section under the New World category. We'll put a link to this Discord in the description down below. With that being said, leave a like if you enjoyed the video, subscribe for more, and I'll catch you guys all in the next one.